All right. Hey, everyone. I am playing around with this today and trying to see what I like the best. And I don't know yet. So we're just going to keep playing with it. Today is April 24th, and this is 2020, April 24th, 2020, quarantine history, video number 7, I believe. We did had the one yesterday that I did that was just some fun history facts, and I'll be doing a few more of those just because I like those too. But today we're going to talk about the um, end of World War One, and I'm really excited about this just because I get to show my history memes. If anyone knows me very well, you know that I love history memes almost as much as I love teaching. Whoever comes up with these are pretty creative. I wish I was this creative. But we're going to focus today on the end of World War One, and specifically, we're going to talk about some. I'm sorry, I'm moving that around quite a bit, just trying to figure out how I want that to look at. But we're going to talk about what the end of World War One means for the world, and then also what it's going to mean into leading into World War Two. Um, so, in my previous videos, we talked about the Russian Revolution, and I want to start there only because I want to come back to something that I said really quickly, and this is something that was pretty significant for the start of World War Two. And that was when Vladimir Lenin took over the country. He wanted out of the war, World War One, because they were having a revolution. They were having a civil war in Russia, and he couldn't fight two wars at once. And so, in order to get out of the war, he kind of pledged his allegiance to Germany. Now, if you remember, he was in Germany when right before the Russian Revolution started, and Germany sent him to Russia to kind of create problems. So he does kind of feel like he owes something to Germany. And also, Germany is losing the war, and the United States is not in it at this point. And so they need, well, the United States was probably in it at this point. Yeah, they were, but I'm sorry, I was getting my dates mixed up. But United States was in it, but Germany needed anything that they could get in order to get a stronghold on the war. And so one of the things that they did is that they signed a treaty with Russia called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which ceded a lot of the territory that Russia had to Germany. Now, I really don't know what Germany thought that they were going to gain by this in terms of winning the war, other than um, land is power. And so I guess they felt like if they had this land, they also owned the people. And so if they had the people, then they could put them into the war, and maybe they could win it. But we're going to kind of put a pin in this. This is going to be really, really important at the end of the war. Okay, so the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is going to be majorly important. All right, so the United States is in the war at this point, and I don't know if you realize this, but majority of the war was fought in France. And France just had the holy hell beat out of them, excuse my language. You can go online and just Google World War One battlefields in France, Belgium too. But you can see pictures of still today of trenches that had been dug in the land that have never fully grown up, and it has forever changed the landscape of some of those areas in France. And so France has just had a total beating during this war. I mean, majority of this war was fought in France. And so we are desperate for any type of a change in this and ending the war. Um, So in November, October, somewhere in October of 1918, Austria-Hungary finally leaves the war. And when Austria-Hungary leaves the war, it sets up Germany needing to leave the war. And if you'll remember from how the war started, it started because Austria-Hungary went to Germany and said, if we could declare war on Serbia, will you back us? And Germany said yes. They gave them a blank check, remember? And that blank check is going to come back and really, really pound them right now. All right, so the cost of the war, we're going to go through this real quick and then we'll get into the treaty. They estimated that about 37 million were killed or wounded in the 4 years of fighting. And the Spanish flu, which is very weird that we're talking about the Spanish flu because we're in a pandemic not unlike the Spanish flu right now. And the Spanish flu will kill more people than was killed in the war. So you have roughly around 100 million people who died from the war or the Spanish flu. Okay. And I might do a video just on the Spanish flu by itself, so I'm not gonna get into that. Okay, so when Austria-Hungary leaves the war, Germany is forced to understand that they cannot continue, and they are insistent that Wilhelm II step down as Kaiser. And so we're going to go to our PowerPoint at this point now. In the PowerPoint, see if we can get it up here. Okay, so let me get in here. So on November 11th of 1918, they requested an armistice to be signed because they were running out of food and supplies, and this is Germany. And an armistice is just kind of like it's a pre-peace treaty. They agree to stop fighting while a peace treaty is negotiated. And this is why we celebrate Veterans Day on November 11th, because that was when the Allies agreed to the armistice at 11 a.m. on November 11th of 1918. And they changed it from, it was Remembrance Day at first, and they changed it to Veterans Day after a couple of more wars because we didn't really have any idea that there was going to be another war fought like this. All right, so once the war is finished, they have to hammer out a peace treaty. And so the Allied nations meet in Paris in 1919, and their mission is to decide the fate of Germany and the Central Powers. And so the people involved in this are going to be Britain, France, the United States, and Italy. One of the things that I didn't go into is Italy had been an ally of Germany, but they switched in the middle of the war, and they actually attacked Austria while they were in Austria, and that was their ally. And so they kind of like double crossed them and switched and came over to the Allies side. Okay, so these is what we call the Big Four. Now, unfortunately, Italy is not going to take a really strong role in this. It will mostly be the Big Three, and Woodrow Wilson will actually head this. He has 14 points that he wants to incorporate into this peace treaty. And he actually says that Germany should not be blamed too harshly for the war. Well, George Clemenceau, who was the prime minister of France, said, negative, sir. Germany should be totally blamed for this war, mainly because my country was completely and totally destroyed during this. And, you know, he has some rights to say that, because the most of the fighting happened on French soil. France had sustained huge amounts of damage, and so he felt that Germany should take the blame for the war and be forced to pay reparations. All right, so they finally hammer out some details for the Treaty of Versailles of 1919, and it was signed by the Allied powers in Germany on June 28th of 1919, and this officially ends World War One. Now, here's the problem with this treaty, and this is why it leads directly into World War II. This treaty was especially harsh to Germany. Now, don't misunderstand me on this. I get why it was especially harsh for Germany, but Germany has some really good points in that Austria-Hungary was also involved in this. Russia really got no blame in this whatsoever, and they basically did the same thing for Serbia that Germany did for Austria-Hungary. Russia told Serbia, whatever you need, we will help you with. And that's what Germany did with Austria-Hungary. This treaty forces Germany to accept all responsibility for the war, all of it, all the loss of life, all the damage that was done, and not only to France, but to all the countries involved. Okay, here's my first meme that I love. I am not a Game of Thrones person, but I felt this was hilarious. This was apparently the last reading of the script for the last season of Game of Thrones. And if you can't read it, it says Germany reading the Treaty of Versailles, and then the Allies laughing at them. And bless Germany. I mean, this was what happened. Okay, so Germany is forced to disarm, meaning they are forced to give up all weapons. And they also are forced to say that they will not make weapons and they will not keep weapons. And they're forced to get rid of the majority of their military. They're forced to give up land to France and to pay reparations of 132 billion marks, which is about 33 billion US dollars. Now, they'll pay like 1 year, and then and we'll get into that when we talk about the Great Depression. They pay like 1 year and then they quit, and then they don't start paying back again until after World War II. But they finally will finish paying reparations in 2010. Okay. So out of this, we get some new borders. Now, I said that they were forced to give up land to France, and I'll talk about that. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Hopefully, I'm still recording. If not, I'll have to come back. They were forced to give land to France, and that I'll talk about also when we get into the beginnings of World War II. But we're going to see some new countries form: Poland, Finland, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia. This will begin when Russia becomes known as the Soviet Union, and Ottoman Empire then will later also become Turkey. Now, Germany will have to give up provinces of Alsace and Lorraine to France, and that's going to be important when I get to that video later. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about just real briefly. This is going to be a League of Nations is formed. This is kind of like a precursor to the UN that we have today, and it hopes to settle disputes between countries. It's not very effective, obviously, since we had World War II. The League officially was founded by the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, some facts about the end of the war. The United States did not sign the Treaty of Versailles. In fact, the Congress did not agree with Woodrow Wilson at all and did not agree with him being over there. They did establish their own treaty with Germany, but they refused to join the League of Nations. All right, so we're going to talk about the War Guilt Clause. In the Treaty of Versailles, The war guilt clause is called Article 231. And here's the problem with it. In the Article of 231, it says right here, the Allied and associated governments affirm and Germany accepts the responsibility of Germany and her allies for causing all the loss and damage to which the Allied and associate governments and their nationals have been subjected as a consequence of the war imposed upon them by the aggression of Germany and her allies. Okay, so it sounds like, according to this, that Germany and Austria-Hungary will both be equally responsible for the reparations. But after the war, Austria-Hungary separates and they are no longer an empire. And because of this, they say they are not to be blamed for World War I. Hungary refuses to take the blame for it. Austria refuses to take the blame for it because they are no longer a combined kingdom. So it does state that Austria is at fault, but Austria says, no, we're no longer that kingdom we were, so we're not at fault anymore. The Allies tell Germany, you're going to have to suck it up and you're going to have to pay for it. They are not allowed to negotiate. They are not allowed to, in any way, shape, or form, disagree with it. And the Allies tell them, because of that blank check that you give Austria, this blame of war falls on you. Now, remember the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk? This treaty also says, the Treaty of Versailles also says that any land that they received in any treaties leading up to the Treaty of Versailles, they have to give up. So if they signed a peace treaty with another country, like Russia, and they received land, such as they did in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, they're forced to give that up. Does anybody remember what country Hitler invaded to get that he said was theirs? Poland. And Poland was part of that land of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. They also had to reduce their military and eliminate their weapons. They could not have a weapons factory. They had to completely and totally eliminate the majority of their Navy, their Air Force, any of the military that they had. They could not have it anymore. Okay, and so then two of my other favorite memes. You can't get blamed for World War I if you aren't a country after World War I. That's exactly what Austria-Hungary does. Austria-Hungary says it's not our problem. We were not at fault for this. And then the Germans, after reading the Versailles Treaty, and the French, and this is, the French were exactly like this. The French were like, good on you. You deserve this 100%. And here's where I'm gonna come back, and when we talk about leading to World War II, in no way do I justify anything Hitler did. I want to talk a lot about Hitler, but here's the thing: I 100% agree with the fact that I think this treaty was way too harsh for Germany. Should they have been blamed? Absolutely, absolutely, they should have been blamed. Should they have paid reparations? Absolutely, they should have paid reparations. But here's the thing: they were not the only ones in this. And a lot of countries got out of it by saying that either they had something going on for themselves, Russia, or they weren't a country anymore, Austria-Hungary. And so when the Germans come back trying to rebuild their country, and we'll talk about their horrible economic problems, they say we can't do this because of everything put on us. And they're not wrong. They are totally not wrong in this. And this is one of those things that if we could go back in history and change, I wonder if we would. I wonder if we would change this. Um, would things have changed for World War II? But I think you can see totally. I think you totally can see 100% why that World War II is going to start. It's going to start because that people felt like Germany felt like they were being targeted unfairly, and they needed a break. Now, I'm not going to say I'm sympathetic necessarily with Germany on that point. I mean, I do see their reasoning behind it, and I do see why that they would think that. But they did cause the war. They helped cause the war. But a lot of people were responsible for this too. So I think this is one of those things where we can come back and say, as historians, and I think I had a really good quote. Let me see if I can find it. I found it last night when I was reading. History tells us where we have been and warns us to beware going forward. And I think that's a really good quote. And I think that we can look at the Treaty of Versailles as this. It's a good thing to look at to understand that we need to correct these mistakes. We don't need to keep making these mistakes. And that was a mistake. I do think it was too harsh. I do think that it was too much punishment in there. And you know, and you can disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think this is definitely one of those areas where we can look at it and say, you know, we need to beware of where we were and not make those mistakes again. Right. So I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson on the end of World War One. This will be several more videos. I shouldn't say several, a couple more videos along this line for the end of World War One leading into World War II. We'll talk about the German economic issues and the Great Depression. And so I hope you've enjoyed it today, and I hope you have a great weekend.